Welcome to Ascending Together, where we connect and reflect. I'm your co-host Salmah, and with me is your co-host Meriem. This is a dopamine you need while folding your laundry. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please make yourselves comfortable and join us. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Ascending Together. We have a very exciting topic for you guys today.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Our topic today is our journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When was that moment in our lives where we booked our tickets and decided to dedicate our lives to going towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Meriem, what are you having to drink today?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
I have a big jar of water. I started using my mason jars, the big one,
Okay,
because I realized they make drinking water easier.
good. You bought lids for them, right? So the kids don't go to town?
Yes, so I have
Okay,
lids
good.
and a straw too. So it's just
Okay.
easier to wash, wide mouth mason jar from
Yes,
glass than
yes,
like the water bottles. So
yes.
that's what we are doing now.
I'm also just drinking water as well. Okay, so do you want to start us off? When your journey started?
Yes. So I don't remember clear cuts in my adulthood, but I do remember a
Mhm.
significant event when I was a teenager. When I was 15
Okay.
years old.
Mm.
And it was just this random lecture.
Mm.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. SubhanAllah, how things happen, very random, but they all have a purpose. They all planned very well.
Mhm.
So we moved houses, and
Mhm.
back then we had like a bunch of cassettes, but we didn't use them that much because we used CDs. But I
Mhm.
still had a radio in my room, and I had cassettes and CDs. And I'm like, let me go through these cassettes. And I was just
Mhm.
having quiet time in my room, enjoying having a room for my own for the first time. And they were Islamic lectures. And one of them was
Mhm.
the story about Meriem radiallahu anha. So,
Alayhi salam, yeah.
alayhi salam, yes. So the imam or the sheikh, sorry, was saying, Kuni Maryamiya, like be like a Maryam. And he
Mm.
talked about all the attributes that Maryam alayhi salam had.
Wow, subhanallah. Yeah.
And that's when I wore my hijab, and that's where like it clicked.
Mm.
And it's 15 years later, and I still like go back to it. I still always remember it. Like
Yeah.
this is one of the reasons names hold an important aspect to me, because I'm like, wow,
Mhm.
because my name was Mariam, I was
Mhm.
able to
To
relate.
connect.
Yeah,
Allah
and I
meant for you. Allah meant for you to hear that.
yeah, subhanallah,
Subhanallah.
subhanallah,
There's no
yeah,
such thing as coincidence when it comes to Allah. Like luck
yeah.
and coincidence, those
They
words that
don't
we use in the West, they don't exist with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has
know.
everything planned out, subhanallah.
Subhanallah, alhamdulillah. Yeah, I would say that was my first aha moment
Mm.
when I felt like I was able to decide for myself, to look and learn. Because as a child, you're kind of just learning whatever they give you in school, whatever your
Mm-hmm.
parents give you, right? And I grew up in a
Mm-hmm.
Muslim country.
Mm.
Uh,
Okay.
so whatever is happening in school is what we learned.
Mm-hmm.
But after that lecture, I made sure, like in Ramadan specifically, that I would go through all the channels in the satellite and see what's shows they have, right? And make
Mm-hmm.
sure, okay, I want to watch this show at this time. Like when
Yeah.
I say show, I'm sorry, I mean like Islamic.
Okay.
What do you call it? Like an Islamic.
Good.
When you have
Or
the
like,
sheikh
yeah. Yeah.
giving stories. My favorite one was Quranic stories, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, I made sure to see which baramij, which shows that I wanted to
Mm,
watch so I can
mm,
learn. It was like that's when I started my own learning journey. So I
mm,
love Quranic stories. I love Tariq Swaydan. Do you know him?
mm. No.
He had so many good shows,
Mm,
mashallah. So I think that was the beginning of me looking things up, trying to learn, relating to Quranic stories, prophetic stories, learning about the Sahabiyat, looking for a role model, learning
mm,
more about our role models to be specific.
mhm, mhm,
I I think as my personality works that way, I
mhm,
like to reflect my role models' behavior, I guess, or manners or character.
mhm,
So it's inspiring for me to learn more about them.
mhm.
And I guess it comes again like Kuni Mariamia, it meant to this is the character and you have to
Yeah,
be it, right?
yeah.
For so Kuni Mariamia just means be a Maryam.
Mhm.
And alhamdulillah, so I think that's when it started. But definitely we had to renew that over the years. So every
Mm.
phase, like when I went from, a teenager to an adult, when I went from an
Yes.
adult to being married, when I went from being married to being a mom, when I went from being a
Mhm.
mom to actually, like working or having a business or, these things, there's always a renewal phase, right?
Yeah, yeah,
To go back to who am I? Why am I doing this?
yeah.
What am I
Mhm.
spending my time in? Why did Allah put me in this position? What am I
Yeah,
supposed to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell you, well, I gave you this. What did you do with it?
yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's my reflection. What about you?
I'm just want to go back to when you said you would flip through the channels because I'm Egyptian, so my brain went to musalsalat because
Oh
that's
yeah. No, they were Egyptian channels, but they were like Iqra, and
yes,
there were
yes,
other,
I know
you
you're
know,
talking about.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I would
Um,
say my journey happened over two phases. Um, the first phase was maybe when I went to college and I was exposed to MSA and exposed to the realities of our deen. Um, and I felt for the first time a sense of community, a sense of people around me. So that was like the first step. I mean, looking back now, it probably wasn't the most ideal type of practice, but again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans things in a way that's gradual for you,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I would say the biggest ever shift that happened to me. This is a little bit heavy, but after a couple months after I got married, I was pregnant, and that pregnancy ended in a loss. It was a pretty traumatic loss just because it wasn't like it wasn't an early pregnancy loss. No, I was pretty far along.
Yeah, and
Um,
then yeah.
um, and I think what shocked me was and the experience itself was okay, like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put, like, a sakina in my heart, like, I was very, very calm through the process, I was present at the burial, I was okay, alhamdulillah. I think
Yeah.
my shock came from um, how certain how some people responded to the incident, um, from a culture perspective, right? Um, I think that 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 was the biggest kinda like, "Whoa" moment for me,
Mhm.
because I had a lot of conflicting information, right? I had, um, people who were more practicing of their deen sending me a hadith like, like, "She's gonna drag you into Jannah, she's a bird right now in Jannah," and, like, things to really console me and validate, um, the trauma, and then there was the complete opposite, like, "Why do you even care?" Um, and then I was
Wow.
like yeah, and I was like, "Okay, this is I've never experienced something like this before," and
Yeah.
it kind of led me down the rabbit hole of rewiring my brain of what is culture and what is Islam. And I kind of just went down a rabbit hole since then. I remember coming across, and I think I was pretty old. Yeah, I was almost 30. And I remember coming across something like, Allah loves me. Like, excuse me, what?
Yeah.
Allah loves me. I've never heard that in my life, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
like and like that, and I was like, wait. So Allah isn't trying to punish me. Allah isn't out here to get me. Um that was
Yes.
I'm laughing because I look back now
Yeah.
and how ridiculous some things that we try to push at that our culture, we try to
Yeah.
push and say that that's deen, and how detrimental it is for someone who does not know their deen well to kind of buy that, because it makes them resentful, right? It makes
Yeah.
them very resentful.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
That's not ridiculous, because I think everyone who you're gonna talk to, whether they grew up here in the West or
Mhm.
back home in a Muslim country, the notion of Allah loves you doesn't really show up. It's always about what's haram, what's haram. We know
Yeah,
more of what's haram than what's the halal, right?
yeah,
And which
yeah.
is like, we have to learn it, but in the
Mhm.
meantime, we spend way more time on the technicalities
Technicalities. Mhm.
than creating that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, and it's always a lot of like, Allah's love is very conditional, when in reality,
Yeah.
Allah is the only
Hmm.
one that loves you unconditionally.
Yeah.
Um, so that was really that was, and until today, this journey is still going on, where, okay, I'm unlearning, deleting a lot of programming, relearning. And like now that I'm like, okay, yes, I have this yaqeen that Allah does love me, and how yani, Allah has planned my life and all these things. Now I'm kind of on a journey where, okay, I also need to unlearn how I perceive cultures too, how I perceive the Western versus our cultures back home, what's positive, what's negative. It's a whole huge, gigantic learning process. Um, and
Yeah.
that's basically it. Like, I mean, and then we had another loss, subhanallah, and I think that one was even more because I didn't expect it to happen twice.
Yeah.
And then alhamdulillah, we had a son, and then I got hit with postpartum depression. And then you're always faced with people be like, aren't you happy you have a healthy kid now? Isn't that what you wanted?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ya Allah, like, what is this? And
Yeah.
then another journey started again, right? So it's, subhanallah, it's always very, very, very gradual. Alhamdulillah. But you learn, right? Like, I learned that no government agency, no ruler, no anyone who thinks that they're in power is in power. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in power, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans your life in the best way possible. Like, you think
Yeah,
that you're going to,
alhamdulillah.
yeah,
He's the most just, so
exactly.
wow. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah that
So
he
yeah,
is the
yeah,
one that's on
alhamdulillah.
power. Um, yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
you're right. I mean, those are experiences. Every experience we go through,
Mm,
there's a lesson behind it. There is a
yeah.
story. There's a purpose behind it.
Mhm.
And I remember my friend said one time, "Hey, well, you asking Allah for patience. He's gonna give you opportunities to practice that patience,
Mm.
right?" So all of these. Okay, let me repeat
It's okay,
that.
guys. This is this is a motherhood podcast, so you're gonna hear it. You're gonna hear some.
Let me repeat that. So
Yeah.
I'm saying is, if you ask Allah for patience, He will give you opportunities to practice that patience. It's not
Mm.
it's going to show up the next day and you're going to be the most patient person, right?
Mm.
And you going through these experiences that build you up, that make you
Yeah.
stronger,
Yeah.
right? That's the purpose from our life, is
Mhm.
to climb the ladder to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
And as you said, like, it's a learning journey. Like, the first word in the Quran is iqra.
Yeah.
We're always learning. I always go back to the homeschooling perspective. our kids are always learning since day one. Like my
Mhm.
youngest now, she's 1. She learned all of these things without being verbal,
Yeah.
right? Like just from watching us.
Osmosis, yeah.
SubhanAllah, like we are
Yeah.
always learning. We're learning patterns. We're learning new patterns that we have to uh, go through and sort through. Is this
Mhm.
something that's helping me to be the best servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I can be? Is this not helping me?
Yeah.
And reflecting on them, you see your growth. And as I said like earlier, I realized that I learn best when I learn about role models and
Mhm.
try to embody their character.
Mhm.
So when
Yeah.
you learn, you find out these things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You will
Yeah.
not find them out by somebody else telling you. You have to go through the practice of learning. And
Yeah.
right.
And I feel like we're kind of in this weird time where like everyone's spitting their thoughts on social media. So you have like this embodiment sometimes of practicing your deen correctly, but it's through anger, right? And and then I think back, right? And subhanAllah, like we love Quranic stories. I story tell. And I go back to subhanAllah, like how Meriem alayhi salam, she wished she was dead. You know, in
Yeah.
2025, we would call that what? Suicidal ideation, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because of the embarrassment of having a child, of going through labor. She's going through labor alone,
Mm.
but she's a human being, right? Musa alayhi salam, when he says like, I'm scared, I can't talk clearly, right? And he asks, Ya Allah, shrah li sadri, wa yassir li amri, right? He was
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yep.
Why? Because Allah created us in moments of that we have moments of not
Yes.
weakness. This doesn't make us weak. It makes us
Yeah.
vulnerable, and we go back to rely on the one that we have to rely on.
Yes, and I always bring up this story of Musa alayhi salam to my kids because I learned that in the beginning of the conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala,
Mhm.
when he threw his stick and it turned into a snake, he was frightened.
Yeah.
And by the time, like after all the events, by the time the last time he spoke to Pharaoh,
Mhm.
he had some fear, but it was not
Mhm.
as much as it was in the beginning. Like in the Quran, it says khifa. He had the fear. He was nervous,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
his tawakkul was stronger. His trust in Allah Subhanahu wa Taala's is going to help him was
Yeah.
way stronger because he practiced it, because he went through so many events, right? Even the prophet needed to practice that.
And you know,
Right?
subhanAllah, what my favorite part about Musa alayhi salam is that he's a big guy, right? Like he's not,
Yeah.
you wouldn't expect, like if you're talking about like today's society and like we're talking about masculinity and all these things, part of being masculine is to know when to turn on the vulnerability and who to turn it on with. But if we walk around trying to be macho men and not express any type of emotion, not even to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what kind of life is that? Even as women, like we live in a society where like you're too emotional, you're too sensitive. Yeah, guess what? Allah created me sensitive. So, like, why is sensitivity a negative thing?
Yeah.
Sensitivity makes me a better mom, right?
Yeah.
I'm attuned to my kids. So
Yeah.
so I feel like it's
Yeah.
just like the world has become where the world maybe has always been this place where just kind of angry.
Yeah.
You know, it's
We're
very
also
transactional.
overdiagnosed and overdiagnosing.
Mm,
We're overdiagnosing ourselves.
yeah, yeah.
We're we are aware of what's going on, but
Mm,
then we'll only again look at the negative.
yeah.
Like from a parenting and homeschooling perspective, your
Mm,
children are not going to be the same. My children are not the same, for
mhm,
example.
mhm.
And if one is more sensitive than the other, that it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean nothing. Like they're still here in this world. They're going to do what they're supposed to do, which is Allah positioned them in a certain position and they have to show up
Mhm.
to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's just the goal.
Yes,
That is the
yes,
end. That's the only goal.
yes.
Everything around it is just tools Some of them are distractions, some of them are tools that help you get closer to your goal, which is being the best servant you can be, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it doesn't
Absolutely.
matter like whose senses are more than other, who's this and that,
Yeah.
but learning to teaching them to acknowledge their emotions. Their emotions are not a bad thing. You're allowed to have your emotions. All those emotions, like
Yeah.
Allah gave them to us as tools again to learn how to handle certain situations.
Yeah.
That's how our body works.
Boys
But
and girls, by
behavior,
the way.
yeah,
Boys
boys and
and
girls,
girls.
of course. Like us now as moms, like that's our job, is to teach our kids
Mm-hmm.
that all emotions are okay. The behavior
Mm-hmm.
is not. I'm not
Yes.
telling you because you feel that way, you can go and assault somebody or break something, right?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is what Allah also said. Like this is where the halal and haram comes. You
Mm-hmm.
don't
And
go
this
and
and
drink
this
alcohol,
notion.
right?
No,
Yeah,
absolutely. And then this notion of
yeah,
like, if okay, well, if I make my son okay with emotions, he's gonna be a little weakling. The
yeah,
Prophet ﷺ was a sensitive person.
yeah.
He just
But
knew
this
when to
comes
turn
from
it on and off.
ignorance. Right, this comes from us not learning our deen, not learning about the
Yes.
prophets. When I mean, growing up, the most thing I remember about learning about the seerah was the battles, which is
Mm,
good to learn from because there's a lot of lessons there, but there
yeah.
was so much more
Yeah.
as like a human being, as a father, as how he talked to the little kids, how he talked to his
Yeah.
wives, like we missed all
Yeah.
of that. All we
Yes.
focus on is when did this battle happen, right?
It's
And
transactions. It's just
mhm,
a lot of our upbringings were just a series of transactions. And like even like the way I can relate to myself, like the Prophet ﷺ went through losses. He lost
mhm,
children too. And he
yeah,
cried. Oh my God, he cried.
yeah,
Nobody told him just
yeah,
say Alhamdulillah. He's just like, yeah,
yeah,
but my heart, I'm content with Allah's will, but I'm still sad
yes,
because Allah
yeah,
created the emotion of sadness.
yeah,
And teaching our sons, especially emotion, they need to be
mhm,
attuned to their wives and their daughters,
yeah,
right? That's critical.
mhm,
Like how many women struggle postpartum with lack of
yeah.
support from their husbands because they have no idea what it is.
Yes, and I actually had this conversation with a client this
Mm,
morning. We
mm,
were talking about family time. It just
mhm.
a family time, as in her and her children, or her husband and her children. Like whatever is possible is good.
Yeah, yeah.
Like one of the goals of doing family time, like put the
Mm,
phone away, put the distractions away. You just
yes,
want to have a conversation because when you're talking, your children are learning how to talk too.
yes,
So when
yes.
when the little girl says something, and the boys decides to shame her for it, or say, "Oh, that's for babies," or that's whatever it is, like
Mhm,
some mean
mhm,
thing kids say, I
mhm.
get to change that with a positive answer. I'm not
Yeah.
here to lecture. We're not going to lecture, but I just say, "Oh, I hear that you got hurt, even that thing happened, or I like your story, or your story,
Mm,
maybe I need to know more about your story. Maybe I'm going to ask you a question," right? Just to
mhm,
direct conversation in a way that's kind, that's acknowledging people's emotions,
mm.
acknowledging that people are different.
Yes.
People are different. You're not the same as everybody else.
Yeah,
So when you
yeah,
find someone who's different than you, there's nothing wrong with them, right?
yeah.
You're not superior. It's,
Mhm.
I'm saying you, but
No,
um,
no, I get
I'm
you
to the
100%.
audience. Sometimes because I'm still translating all the
In
languages in my head to English,
yes,
I
yes,
make these mistakes. But this is what
yes.
what I have in my mind is that, and I've said this so many times, is that if
Mm,
you want to teach one thing to your
yeah.
kids at home is emotional regulation. Because when
Mm,
you regulate yourself and you
mhm,
teach your children to acknowledge their emotions, you're able to think. That's it.
mm.
No one is able to think when they're super angry,
And don't be
right?
surprised when you teach them that, and then they see you dysregulated and call you out on it.
Oh, definitely.
And that's like that. I remember making a post about this about on my parenting page is like parenting is not about teaching your kids. It's about teaching yourself. How are you going to teach them emotional regulation if you don't know how to emotionally regulate? It's not a
100%.
it's not a script. It's not a series of transactions. And I feel like we have to come out of that mindset where learning your deen is not signing up for hifz school. It's not signing up for um, the next course right? You're learning your deen. Yes, there is so much to learn in terms of facts, but it's there also, what's the point of those facts if they're not going to work on your spirituality? We can all keep adding files to our brain of facts and events, right? And dates and names. But if that doesn't bring us closer to Allah, if the pages that you're memorizing in Quran don't bring us closer to Allah, what's the point? And our spirit, we have the same spiritual course. And she tells us it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you're going to memorize Quran. What's the point of the Quran you're memorizing if you're not going to use it in Salah to bring you khushu'ah? What's
Yeah.
the point?
I think she said something like, you don't worship the to-do list or something like that.
Or the feeling. You don't
The
strive for the feeling.
Yeah. But yes, I mean, I wouldn't say like what's the point completely, because I think there is still like barakah in doing so.
Yeah, you're right.
But I would say it's intention is a big thing, which actually reminds me of something. I did not learn the practice of making intention before doing things, or even doubling on intention. And I remember that when I learned that, I'm like, wow, it's really hard for me to take a moment. It's like I'm doing this for this purpose, like grounding myself and rethinking the process. I'm like, okay, I got this idea. I want to do this event. I want to do this activity. But what's the point? Why are we doing it?
Why?
Is it because it sounds good? Because somebody else did it? Because it feels good? And there's nothing wrong with all of these, but it has to be because it's bringing me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's doing something good, a good deed. Like the events that we just did recently, I had to take a moment to say, yes, it's good for the community, it's good for my kids, it's good for all of these things, but it should be happening on the expense of me not praying on time, for example.
Yeah.
Right? It could wait. What if it's not perfect? What if we forgot something? It doesn't matter. But then, alhamdulillah, that we go back to the concept of barakah. When you prioritize praying on time and doing what's your duties, what's required of you, when you show up as the best servant you could be, the other things happen, even if they're not supposed to be happening in a mathematical sense or in like logical sense. Allah makes them happen.
And that's something I know that me and you really, really struggle with, is control. And I remember, I don't know if you sent me this, but it was incredible because you can determine the what, you can determine the why, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to determine the how. So stop trying to do the work that was not meant for you to do. You tie your camel, you make your effort, you don't neglect your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you leave the rest to Allah.
Yeah, and this statement makes a lot of people nervous because of releasing control. And again, like I like to remind them, as you know how you get a light bulb moment? Well, that's the how. That is the how. You go on, just focus on what you want to do, and if it's really aligned, and that's it. It will happen. The how will be a person coming, texting you on Instagram about something, and then that snowballs into a series of events.
I mean, subhanAllah, like both of our businesses, that's how they were born, right? Like it's just like click, okay, I need this. Oh wait, maybe other people need this too.
And when I look back again, I'm like, this was not supposed to happen. Like mathematically. Right? It's the barakah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I know, like since we lost those first two pregnancies, every other subsequent pregnancy becomes a high risk. And my sense of control during my last two sons was insane. And this final part, not the final, inshallah, not, but this fourth pregnancy was here in a different state, and they were a lot more chill than my current 4-year-old. And I remember I'd be like, come on, like, can you just be a little bit more aggressive? Just do this instead. Like, why are you not giving me this medication? And I'm just like, but then I'm like, okay, just they're not bringing life. Allah is in control, and you don't rest. It's really hard to turn that off.
Yeah, I mean, you do I don't know how do you say in English, but تأخذ بالأسباب.
Yes.
You know, you take action. Is that what it means? I
Yeah.
think.
Yes. 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 You tie
And
your camel.
yeah, you tie your camel. I heard this from Sheikh Nabulsi years ago. And again, it brings us back to the title is when did you book your tickets? Is that
Yes.
there are so many events that keep building upon each other
Mm-hmm.
and we keep remembering them to bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
So like one of these words or like one of these events, what I learned is, for example, Kuni Mariamiyya, that comes back to me. With these
Mm-hmm.
affirmations, I would say, خُذ
Yeah.
بالأسباب will keep
Mhm.
coming back. مقامك حيث أقامك keeps
Yeah.
coming back, right?
Yeah.
So we we are going through our path, collecting these
Mhm.
gems,
Mhm.
and we're using them as tools to always remind us.
And they're
Uh,
seared.
yeah,
They're seared into
yeah,
our minds. Yeah.
yeah. So whenever you go through a turbulence,
Yeah.
right? You just bring them out of your pockets. I'm like, okay, let's regroup.
Yeah.
What's going on? Why am I doing this? And is this what I want? Is this what's good for us? Is this what's possible for us right now?
Yeah.
And you make istikhara, you make dua, and the
Yeah.
opportunity showed up. A lot when I was practicing not worrying about the how and letting go
Mm.
of control and learning to be more into like lean into
Mm.
tawakkul on Allah
Mm.
subhanahu wa ta'ala
Yeah.
is I'm like, well, what if the how doesn't show up? What if I miss seeing the how? I'm like, it's not a sign that's gonna be flying in front of
It's
me.
not a dream. Like
I think
like
that
our
comes from like
istikhara. Like our yeah.
movies. I think that just really comes from stuff that we watch or we heard
Yeah.
along
Yeah.
throughout the years, like
A
movies and
lot of
nonsense.
unlearning. A lot
Yeah,
of
a lot of
unlearning.
them learning. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
So when you make the intention,
Mm.
things just happen. And then you reflect later. I'm like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
And
And
sometimes
I
we won't
think
even get
yeah,
it.
go ahead. Mm.
Sometimes we won't even get it in this dunya.
No,
And
but
that's fine.
we're not going to. And subhanAllah, like
Mm.
Shaitan likes to use this model of okay, you booked your ticket and
Yeah.
wants to make you think that you don't have enough time, you're not smart enough, or you're not there's nothing you can do for you to reach that destination. But
Yeah.
again, the destination is not for the dunya. The dunya was
Yeah.
we're never going to achieve a point in our lives where our spirituality is just top notch, your khushu' 17 times a day. There is always something to learn. There's always growth, and it's never too late. Right? There are
Yeah.
Sahaba that converted and I love the Sahaba because we sometimes in our communities we're not very especially people who are very cultural, we don't really think we don't we question converts and their backgrounds and stuff like that. And I'm always like, all the companions were converts too.
Yeah.
Like if people didn't convert, Islam wouldn't have spread the way it spread, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's like I love this how because like what some of them were children,
Mhm.
some of them were elderly, and
Yeah.
and and that they had their aha moments too.
Yeah.
You know? And it
Yeah.
reminds me, like, when the Prophet ﷺ, mentions us, his brothers and sisters, and one of the companions ask him, like, "Aren't we your brothers and sisters?" He's like, "No, but you see me, guys. You're around me." Right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the people that follow me when they don't see me.
Yeah.
And there's just such a it's such a beautiful, dynamic, subhanallah. So, do you have anything to say? Any last thoughts before we conclude, inshallah?
Um, that a concept's called like take inventory
Mm,
of your like the events, like the book your tickets kind of thing, like the
mm,
events that shaped you, that
mhm,
allowed you to be the way you are today. Oops, sorry.
yeah,
And I think it's very helpful because it could be putting pressure on people when they're like, oh, but I don't know, I don't think I had the traumatic event, right? I don't think I
Yes.
had the big event that
Yeah.
will make me. Give me one moment.
Mhm. I'm gonna add to what you're saying while you take a moment. Whatever events you had or didn't have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has meant for you not or to have those events. So like Meriem said, I would definitely encourage us all to have these check-ins with yourself spiritually, like, okay, where am I right now? What can I do better? And ask Allah to help you to get to where you want to be, inshallah.
Yes, so taking time to reflect, see what stories that happened before and how they shaped you today, see the beauty in them, see the positive
Mhm.
aspects of the things that made you sad once, right?
Yeah.
That helps us be more grateful. That helps us, realize that we have so many blessings, and also just
Alhamdulillah.
look at all the blessings around you.
Yeah.
And alhamdulillah, yeah,
And
just
if
wanted
you're
to.
struggling, if you're struggling with past or with certain dynamics as you were growing up, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen all of that for you to shape you, right? He has chosen the little nuances of what was missing from your life or what you did have in your life to maybe make you into a different parent. Because sometimes we go after what we didn't have.
Oh yeah, it's the grass is
All of that
always
is
greener
intentional.
on the other
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, sometimes, like, when you become a parent, for example, you're like, okay, I want to give my kids what I really missed out on.
Oh
Whether
yeah.
that's emotional, whether that's physical, whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
Allah has intended all of that. None of these are coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
whatever experience, we always say alhamdulillah for our experiences, alhamdulillah. And do you want to make dua and close us out?
You can go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah for our life experiences that helped shape us. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free all of our oppressed brothers and sisters around the world. And may we always be on a beautiful, fulfilling spiritual journey and booking our tickets towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And
I
on our
mean,
Ameen, Ya Rab. And on our next episode, inshallah, we are going to be talking about the details of the positions that Allah have assigned us. Maqamik haythu aqamik, from where we talked about last week. Inshallah. Jazakum
inshallah.
khairan for joining us, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Imagine a field so open and bright, flowers swaying in golden light. Your little one watches, eyes full of wonder, as a tiny bee bounces from one petal to another. His curious mind begins to hear.
وأوحى ربك إلى النحل أن اتخذي من الجبال بيوتا ومن الشجر ومما يعرشون.
Welcome to tomorrow's harvest, where the world around us meets the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are more than just posters. They are windows into the wonders of His creation. Are you ready to ponder with your little one?